how do you define pressure testing? What is pressure testing to you?
So this is actually a great topic for discussion because it's true. In the martial arts world, we do tend to throw around a lot of jargon and sort of expect people to know what we're talking about. And pressure testing is a relatively vague phrase. Now, to me, pressure testing is sort of an umbrella term for a wide assortment of training practices. But the core component of those training practices in order to be pressure testing is that you are in some way testing your ability to execute the techniques of your martial art under pressure or against resistance. And you can do that in a wide variety of ways. And I think the reason that a lot of us use the phrase pressure testing is because the alternative to that is the word sparring. And sparring isn't a very good term either because when you hear the word sparring, it almost always brings to mind one particular practice, and it's whatever one you're most familiar with. So if you were to say sparring to somebody who does point fighting karate tournaments, their idea of sparring is point fighting. If you say sparring to somebody who does kickboxing, they're going to think of kickboxing style sparring. If you say sparring to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, they're going to think of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu free grappling. So it's really not a very descriptive term, and at the same time, it tends to isolate people's idea of what it is. Whereas the umbrella term of pressure testing, while it is still vague, it doesn't tend to come with a particular idea. Now, that is why it's important for us to then elaborate on what we mean by pressure testing depending on the conversation that we're having. So, yes, in certain circumstances, point fighting is pressure testing, kickboxing style sparring is pressure testing, free grappling is pressure testing, but on top of that, there are a lot of other sparring methodologies that you could consider. Boxing style sparring, a striker versus grappler type of sparring, bully sparring, where one person's job is just to keep attacking no matter what while the other person has to defend. And even getting outside of what you would generally consider sparring, we can consider things like reality-based scenario training, where you have role play aspects, where you try to verbally de-escalate a situation, where you try to escape and evade, where you have to defend if it comes to that. And during those circumstances, the attackers you're training with can resist and put you under a lot of pressure. So there's a lot of ways to pressure test your material. It's going to depend on what kind of material you train and what context you're training for. That's really what defines the type of pressure testing that you use. And personally, I'm of the opinion that you should not isolate yourself to a singular pressure testing or sparring method. It's just a really limiting way to train. And not only is it more fun to train in a variety of different sparring methods and pressure testing methods, it's also more valuable because you're covering a lot more ground. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'd love to hear your thoughts either in the comments or as a Stitcher duet.